Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time to tune in to the We the Collective podcast, where we talk about health, fitness, and I'm aligning things with some guests to make sure that we can go ahead and have stories about other people's journeys so we can kind of show what we all are collectively going through. So, for the short term, I just want to make sure that I got some other information out there for anybody who's listening. Now, I've done a carbs podcast. Again, these are really quick. I've done a protein one, and now it's time for fat. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about fat and all the good and the bad that comes along with it. So to get the science stuff out of the way, when we talk about carbs and proteins, they both have 4 calories per 1 gram. However, when it comes to fat, for 1 gram, it's now 9. So that's more than double. So a lot of times people will start to make the assumption that, fat's bad for you because it's much more calorically dense. Uh, while true, it is double the caloric density, it can do a lot of good and other bad things for us. So one of the good things that we absolutely need fats for is for our ability to use soluble vitamins. So things like A, D, K, think E, like these other ones, we absolutely need to have fat in our diets or we are not able to absorb certain nutrients. So if without it, it just does not allow our body to pick up on the stuff. So having fat is important to go ahead and have. It also helps with a lot of the regulations of hormones, the organ tissues, and some of those other bits and pieces need these fats to be able to operate properly. And just being able to monitor things like our own insulin. So having certain fat count will go ahead and help you to adjust and monitor your insulin a little bit. It's just when we start to go a little bit too far and we're unable to regulate our insulin, that's when the diabetes stuff starts to kick in, usually that type 2. But I wanted to make sure that we talked about a few things that are really important. So people will say that fats are unhealthy because they're calorically dense. Yes, but we do need these other foods to make sure that we can digest and process and run our hormones and do all these other things within our body, which is absolutely pivotal for us to be able to be alive. Now, what I remember was back in the 90s, there's this big push to go ahead and say like fats are bad, fats are unhealthy. And there'd be in the grocery store, you'd see a snack wall aisle and there used to be like hundreds. I kind of remember it. Like there, maybe not, but like there was a lot of items that were referenced as snack wall. I've had snack walls in my house, and they prided themselves on being like low to no fat, thinking that was a really good marketing ploy because we all assumed that fat made us fat. What ends up being really kind of humorous about it, it's just the over delivery of calories, right? If we overconsume the amount of calories compared to the amount we move our body around, we'll start to store the energy, period. It does not matter if it's carbs, fats, sugars, it does not matter. So what people were doing is you can actually go ahead and say this is 100% true. You could take an entire bag of sugar, and then on that bag of sugar, you can slap 100% fat-free because it is 100% fat free. There is no fat within sugar, but sugar can still make you fat by over consuming it, right? Having too much of anything is usually not going to be the best thing. Like, I love a good beer, but I don't need 35 beers to have a good time. I would be pretty sickly if I had to go ahead and get 35 beers now. Weird challenge, not for today. But again, kind of recognizing that we would kind of misinterpret some of these simple things within our own diets. Though sometimes we do have to keep in mind that even the concept of vitamins didn't even show up until like the 1920s. Like we didn't really know about that stuff until almost modern history stuff, like within the last 100 years. Like we've just started learning these things. So it's important for us to go ahead and take the time and get the good understanding of it. Now, as a sports nutritionist, I think of it this way. My food overall should be roughly around like 20%, like 20% of my calories should come from fats. That again, to make sure the rest of the regulation and all those other bits and pieces are working properly. So that's what I would kind of stick to that recommendation. If you're really going on a harder cut and maybe you're pushing a little bit more, maybe 15% on the lowest of low sides. Beyond that, then it starts to become a problem, right? The body doesn't have enough resources to go ahead and process the rest of the stuff out. So for an example of that one, on YouTube, I still follow the guy, Athlete X. So if you've ever seen him, his face is really, really sunken in, very, very low, like body fat percentage. And he does share a story of like when he was younger and he fell for all of this, where he thought that fat was bad. So he avoided fat like the plague. So he would eat anything he wanted to for his regular diet, but he would avoid fat, thinking that was what's going to like ruin his gains. And he ends up having a very like sunken face, and he even refers to himself as Skeletor in a video or two. And it kind of showcases the issues that come along with it. So not only did his face kind of look sunken in, he started developing like vision problems from this. There was like concern from going blind at some point. So really taking the time to recognize that like fats aren't necessarily bad, but not all fats are necessarily good. So getting into the next topic, not all fats are created the same. I can give you the same spiel as everybody else. Have your avocados. You should have nuts and olive oil and butter and like these other things that have fats in them. Perfectly fine, right? Absolutely go ahead and consume them. For myself, I use I can't believe it's not butter, the light one. I find it very much the same. I just usually do bread and butter. But things like avocados, I'll still go ahead and eat. No problems, no change ups whatsoever. Olive oil, I'll use it in a mister just to make sure I don't go ahead and go nuts. I think olive oil is one of the most misleading things of like health foods, because we go ahead and we line our pans with olive oil and then like saute vegetables. You got to keep in mind for a second that 1 teaspoon could be upwards of 120 calories. And if I said it wrong, it's a tablespoon. And if you put them side by side and then said one of these two is correct, and then the amount that you actually put into the pan, you're going to be surprised at how many like additional calories are just being added into it. So a little bit can go a long way, but making sure that those pieces still get to come in. But then on the other end of the spectrum, the other oils that we have out there for like frying chicken, like I love good fried chicken, and that's not going to go ahead and be the same type of fat that's going to be good for the body. So some of these other polysaturated, monosaturated, some of these other products might not digest as well. They don't store as well as some other things on the shelf that you might be able to see. So making sure that we can kind of get the full spectrum of what we need from the fats that are in there. Again, other fats, people are going to say fish. Again, I don't eat a ton of fish, so I'll take fish oils, and then try to eat fish every once in a while. Being from the Midwest, I would love that fish was better, but I don't go out of my way for it. Fish and chips is great, but not an everyday type deal. So get a good understanding of like where the fat sources are coming from. So it's not just to go ahead and go nuts and have avocado toast every single day, but start to recognize that the foods that you have some fat in it. And fat's good because fat has flavor to it. So when I spend a lot of time with U.S. foods and learning a lot more about cooking and getting that idea behind myself of I can go do these things, I explicitly understood that fat was flavor. I had a jar of bacon grease, and I would just take whatever was left over from making bacon, and I would just use that all the time. It tastes phenomenal. Use it with damn near anything. I constantly use it on Brussels sprouts with a little bit of Parmesan cheese, like, fantastic stuff. And then I started to realize how much of that fat that I was using in comparison to what I was trying to eat like. So understanding that having those things are good, I just need to regulate them within myself a little bit better. So we need to go ahead and have fats in our diet. These things need to be around. Fat is flavor. It's going to make things taste really, really good. But not all fat is bad, but not all fat is good. The idea is to find as many good products, natural products as you can go ahead and use and eat that way. The more processed the stuff is, we kind of have a tendency to start adding more and more things to that process. So again, just by making sugar itself, yes, sugar itself is processed, right? We're not just, we got to go ahead and peel sugar cane and do all the other work, dry it, grind it, and work through all those things. That's still a process, but we're still stuck with a lot of the original pieces in it. When we start to get into a lot of these like super high calorie foods, these really high processed ones, certain restaurants will go ahead and do this because since fat is flavor, they will just load it up with extra fat because it'll make the food taste good. And if you like the food, you'll return. So again, getting good understanding of where the sources are, how you're going to go ahead and use it, and then say, all right, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. It doesn't have to be the end of the world if I have a little bit of fat. Sometimes it's just, I need it because, sometimes you just find some comfort in the fact of having something, fatty, a lot of comfort foods, mac and cheese, like these things are loaded with fat, but they're good. And just get a good understanding of how do I monitor the amount that I need to make sure I can perform at the things that I want to do. So hopefully that's quick and dirty enough to help you get a good understanding of what you want out of some of this programming. Again, if there's any other things that I can go ahead and work on, there's tons of ways to find me, whether it be through Instagram with Brenda's Yoga Lift or We the Collective Fitness, or just even commenting on this below is always helpful. So good luck, and yeah, I guess just good luck.